Not anymore. I'm turning up and down my gain on my mic until I find that sweet spot.
Yeah, your voice sounds
But
sexy right now.
damn, is it all crisp and clear, baby?
Like, I gotta have you read a dirty novel right now.
Oh, I was playing Battlefield 5 with some of my homies, and I was like sitting there and I was like, now entering mid Japan, World War II. And like just like reading everything on the page.
Do you just channel your inner ancestors and play as the Japanese on the Pacific campaign, or?
Dude, every single time I sit there and I go, Japanese, just
All
get
right,
all fucking
everybody.
hype.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mid Tier Thoughts. It is me and Mike again. We are back after a little while, and
Yes, sir.
yeah, we're gonna lay some stuff on you. We're gonna talk about all kinds of jazz today. It's gonna be a
Yeah, and if
little
you guys are
unscripted.
sitting oh, my bad, my bad. If you guys are sitting with us now, yeah, as you can tell, the microphones sound a lot better. I wanna say without the help of the, podcast or anything like that, I just went out and picked myself up a good mic and everything like that, and it's a lot better quality.
Yeah, I'm still working on trying to see if I can get a good computer set up for mine. But yeah, I think overall it sounds much better than when we started out.
Yeah, also, if you guys want to, I'm not sure if you guys are into watching Twitch or anything like that. I've been thinking about just sitting down and playing games, answering questions, just like I was even thinking about doing it with Austin. So we'd be bullshitting, playing some video games, and just like sitting in on like Twitch with you guys or something like that. If you guys are interested in doing something like that, just let me know. I have like all the equipment to do it, and I can get Austin all the equipment to do it. Like I can tell him what to buy on Amazon and
Hmm.
shit, and we can just like play some games, sit there with some video, like Element, answer questions. There's a ton of new stuff out there
I think
that
that
we
would be
can.
a cool thing to do to like yeah, like to like answer questions for people as they go, and also like kind of talk about gaming and stuff like that a little bit too, like a
Oh,
little less serious stuff, you know?
yeah, yeah. Or even if it's like, if you guys want to sit there and bullshit with us, it's kind of hard to do on Instagram lives and Facebook lives and stuff because you have to come up with good, entertaining content to talk about constantly because
Yeah,
like there's no, there's no background kind of nonchalant bullshit going on in the background. There's no like, if we were playing a game together, at least we can like focus on the game and focus on the chat. Yeah, rather than just like just us in the chat. We're kind of just like sitting there until someone says something, and
yeah,
then we're like, "Oh yeah, well this, that, and that," and then we just sit there quietly again.
yeah. I think that is one thing I do. Is I think that doing the Twitch stuff definitely helps out with like the creative burnout, because I'm sure for anyone listening who's ever done YouTube podcasts, anything like that over a long period of time, there's definitely like points in time, like and I'll be completely honest, some of our like more unscripted, I know, like I think it's episode 22 we've got, that's the SHTF off the rails rant, I think it is. It's one of our most successful episodes, but it's also one where like I think the way that went was like you and me met up, like called like 10 minutes before we recorded, and we're like, we're winging it because I got nothing, and it wound up being one of our best episodes.
I'm trying to think of, wait, which one episode was that?
That was the one where you and I were like, "Oh yeah, what would you do in an SHTF scenario?" And then it just kind of devolved into a rant.
Oh,
And
dude, see, right now, I think that's the best time to get into those rants because right now,
oh yeah,
currently, it's 11:12 our time. We've both had full days. Daddy's been
hmm
shit. I'm enrolling in my college bullshit, so we both had full fucking days. We're both kind of
yeah,
tired. I got a little bit of a stony going on, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, dude, right now, what would you do in this scenario? What would you do in that scenario? Certain things like
yeah,
that. And it's like, hell yeah, that's dope.
yeah. Well, and I think like especially with me getting on this new graveyard shift, it's been a little rough trying to keep up with the Instagram and YouTube and the podcast all together, and timing and meeting up with people and everything else, and then trying to get a sleep schedule and everything. So yeah, I definitely see why people do make a full-time job out of this YouTube stuff. Like just the YouTube side alone just takes up so much time, that trying to manage that, the podcast and an Instagram. Like I definitely see why once people start getting really successful at it, that it really does become a full-time job. Like I get that now.
Oh yeah, 100%, dude.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, even like everyone would think it would be a really dope job. I think it'd be a really dope job too, just because I've worked multiple different jobs.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like the burnout would be real on that as well. Like eventually, you gotta get tired of doing that shit over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, like I'll say like I think outside of podcast videos, I've only got like 5 or 6 videos up on our YouTube, I think, and it's one of those things where you're sitting there and you're like, man, I only have so many guns, right? I only have so much gear. What
Mhm.
happens when I've showed it all off? Like, what then? And trying to constantly come up with stuff that like you think people are actually going to want to see, that you find interesting, and that you have available access to is the big thing. I will say it does sound like from some conversations I've had with a few companies that there might be some people willing to support us and send some stuff our way that I've should be inbound shortly to hopefully do some reviews and stuff like that on, which will be kind of cool. And
Sure.
but yeah, so that's kind of a cool development, I think, as far as the this going. But yeah, I mean, I think for those listening, I think anyone that wants to start your own podcast or YouTube or anything like that, that's you really want to dive into that social media thing and kind of do the side gig out of that. My biggest piece of advice is find something that you're really passionate about and you have a lot of ideas about, and then um, find a good schedule that works for you. Because I know whenever I started when I was just doing the Instagram thing, it was easy to try to keep up with a daily Instagram post because it was only one thing and I could do it, take like half an hour on a lunch break and knock out a story and a post and be done.
Yeah.
But you factor in the YouTube side, then you factor in the podcast side, and now it's all this extra stuff that's got to go on, and you got to time it all right. And then you're like, man, and now I feel like I also have to keep up with the everyday thing because you've already established that schedule. And
Mhm.
so I think looking back on it, it's easier to start with like doing something once a week, get comfortable with that, and then up your game than it is to start heavy and then start to fall off.
Think so, huh?
I think so. That's just been my personal experience with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of heavy, actually it has nothing to do with heavy. So
I was
uh
gonna say, let me move the subject real quick because I do have a couple things in front of me right now. So I
yeah, go
got my
ahead.
Grantham on my left screen. I got my Holosun optics that I saw, which I've been really out of date in the gun world. People, I will be honest with you. I will be. I fell off the wagon a little bit because I've been. You know what happened? I kind of got bored. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of got bored following the shit, following everything going on, following what's going on in Shot Show and shit like that because I do feel like I'm just constantly getting fucking bullied, bro. Like I
Mm,
am every time I turn around, a new gun law is passing. Every time I turn around, a new magazine law is passing, or this and that and that and that. So
yeah.
like I'm tracking all of this laws going on and also new gun shit coming out, which honestly the gun market right now pretty fucking dead, dude. There's not a lot going on.
Yeah,
I know
that's
the
not
new
a lot of
Glock.
stuff.
Like I didn't even know
Very
Glock had a new
exciting.
Glock out for a minute. I found that out. I want to say a couple months ago. The Glock. Um, what is it? The new Glock, the one that's like,
The 47, the
yeah,
49.
I think it's the 49. The wait, which one's the 49? Is
Well,
that one the 19 that you
right,
can make into a
they've
17?
got basically a 17 with a 19 frame and then a 19 with a 17 frame, which is basically they just got rid of the 17 and the 19 and made them similar items.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a new version of a 17 that's a little different.
So I didn't even know that was out for a minute. Honestly, the SIG world's been pretty dead since the Spear. So I've mostly been following like optics and
Yeah.
things like that, and new IR lasers, shit like that. A lot of the 3D printed IR lasers coming out right now are fucking sweet titties, boy. Like, there's this dude that makes replica PEC 15s, and they work and run, and they ran them next to each other, two PEC 15s. And, no, I mean a PEC 15, and then his that he built,
Hmm.
and they were fucking damn near identical. And he was selling his for like half the price, if not a quarter of the price of a normal PEC 15. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
think that's the
no,
thing
no,
for
you
me too, is I think that like as far as new guns and stuff go, like is there some stuff out there that's still cool and like maybe some stuff I might like to pick up? Sure.
the
But I think
MP7, the Palmetto State MP7 is
oh
probably the
yeah,
coolest thing I've seen lately.
yeah. I think for me though, the biggest thing right now is like I focus less on like new guns and more on like some more of the maybe like gear and optics and things like that. Like you were saying, that's kind of exciting me now, trying to see what's out there. But um, I was gonna say, have you seen the controversy? Well, not maybe not controversy is not the right word for it, but like T Rex's arms thing about Hollosun.
Oh, where he's like, at least we know they won't go gay. I thought that shit was so funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny about the whole like anti like how they won't be woke because they're Chinese owned or whatever.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's he's like, you know what? I can say one thing about Hollosun. At least I know they're not gonna go gay.
yeah,
And it's just like, I mean, he's got a point.
yeah. I mean, I do think it's funny. I think a lot of people do the whole, oh, your money's supporting China, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't want to go out of my way to actively give money to China, but at the same time, like if you say I'm not giving money to anything that's Chinese, like you just won't be able to spend money, period. Like China's so intertwined with the
Uh,
global, with so many things that we buy on a daily basis.
it
Like
doesn't
it's
even
just
it like
impossible.
even the China thing, like, right? You don't want to directly fund China. Um, dude, it's if okay, gave your money to Satan worshiping, gay loving other company that literally completely opposite supports everything you believe in. And a lot of these companies you find out like Daniel Defense that were actually pro gun, like pro anti-gun. I still have my Daniel Defense rifles. Like at the end of the day, a product is a product, and if it's good, it's good. Is the way I believe in it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it this way where I'm like, I think, yeah, if you want to go out of your way to like for example, I know a lot of gun guys like don't do Starbucks, period, right? Because the big anti-gun stuff. I don't do Starbucks because their coffee sucks, period. I've
Yeah.
never been a fan of Starbucks. That just gave me another reason to further not go there. And so I understand the whole vote with your dollar thing, and I definitely believe there is an impact for that. Just look at like the Planet Fitness thing that's going on recently, where a lady in Alaska saw that there was a dude in the changing room or whatever, and she was like, "Hey," like it was very clearly like an obvious dude, not like someone pretending to be a woman. Like it was a dude, and he was like, "Oh, well, I'm trans, I can be in here." And she was like, she went to go talk to the manager, and he was like, "Well, he identifies as that, and we're all about inclusion, so we'll just cancel your membership." So they've lost like $400 million because people just started boycotting Planet Fitness. So, and that was in like a week, right? So I definitely believe there is absolutely power in voting with your dollar, but I think it's one of those things too, to where um, it's almost impossible to make sure that your dollar does not go to China,
Yeah.
like flat out, right? Also, at the same time, it's one of those things where I'm like, look, man, if Holosun makes decent optics, like, and if you say like, oh well, that's why I bought a Sig Romeo 5. Guess what, homie? It's made in the same factory, and I'm not being hyperbolic. Like
Yep.
a lot of the Sig optics, a lot of like of the Vortex optics, a lot of the how obviously the Holosun and a bunch of companies send their stuff if and they're either mostly worked on or at least or at least all the parts are made over there and then sometimes assembled over here, but China's got a hand in a lot of that, right? I mean, heck, even when it came to ammunition, right? The last U.S. lead smelter was shut down in 2008, right? Because
Mhm.
of EPA concerns, which meant like even the lead that we needed to make bullets came from China.
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Like Lake City Manufacturing, right?
Mhm.
Lake, the place that makes ammo for the U.S. government, for the military, was importing its lead from like our adversary. Like we're literally paying China to give us the bullets to kill China.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's why I'm like, if it's a good product, it's a good product. I don't give a shit, I'll buy it. There's still people rocking
Right.
Patagonia. If it's a good
Yeah.
product, you're gonna wear it, you know?
Yeah. And it's like I definitely understand if you're one of those people who's like, I just don't like it. I'm not going to buy it anymore. Totally understand that. If you have, I totally understand that you're like, hey, I don't like this company anymore, so I don't spend my money with them. Absolutely, I understand that. But if you're
Mhm.
one of those dudes who like the NFL people, where it's like, I'm going to burn my jersey. It's like, why? You already spent the money on it. They don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, you already spent your $80 buying somebody's jersey 6 years ago.
Yeah,
They already have
dude.
your money. Like, literally don't care if you burn it because they know that like 2 years from now, when this all blows over, you're gonna go buy another one.
Yeah. Because 'Cause you're not gonna stop watching football, you like watching football.
Yeah. Although speaking of the like the some of the gun company stuff, one thing I would really like to see um, is I would love to see. Gun companies are always asking like, "Oh man, how are we missing the mark? What do we need to get in touch with with the people?" And they're like making products nobody asked for, stuff like that, just because they need to put something out. I
Mhm.
would love to see gun companies, while yes, focusing on new products and innovation, starts throwing actual money and being public about throwing actual money at pro gun legislation and at like the Firearms Policy Coalition and this the Second Amendment Foundation and Gun Owners of America. Like I want to see this. I want to see companies like Springfield, Ruger, Smith and Wesson. Like I understand, I understand if you're a company like if you're a company that has major military contracts, like let's look at SIG for example, right? I understand if SIG wants to take a step back and maybe not be super vocal because they just secured a bunch of military contracts and they're like, screw it, we're going to make trillions of dollars over the next several years or billions of dollars over the next several years because we've got these military contracts. I don't necessarily agree with that way of thinking, but I understand where they're coming from as a business, right? I get it. But when you're a company like Smith and Wesson, Ruger, Springfield, no one is running your stuff. No military is running any of your weapons, right? Maybe a couple police departments here or there, but like that's it. Not enough to definitely supplement your entire income. So if your main market is the US population, I don't know. I do not understand. I cannot fathom why you would not just be pouring money into pro gun legislation. Like they've got the money for it. Like that's the thing, is like the gun industry has the money to make major pro gun changes, but they don't do it. Instead of fighting, instead of fighting for your rights, they'll just make you a lever action AR.
Yeah.
Like, hey, instead of preventing you from being cucked in the first place, we made you a crap version of our rifle.
Yeah. What I wanted to talk about, though, I'm sorry to change the subject on
No,
this.
go ahead. That's what this is all about. Speaking of throwing money at good causes, we are sponsored by Blackout Coffee. So Blackout Coffee, not only do they make really good coffee, but they actually have coffee that is branded specifically as like the Second Amendment Foundation, the 1776 Foundation, Gun Owners of America, things like that, right? So they actually sponsor those organizations, and whenever you buy the coffee that is marked by those organizations, the funds go from there to support those organizations. So when you are buying Blackout Coffee, not only are you supporting the podcast, but you are supporting a company that is actually sending money to fight for your rights, to fight for you, to help you keep your gun rights and expand gun rights across the country. So again, Blackout Coffee, link is in the description, and check that out, see what they got. They got some really good stuff. I know a few of you guys have already hit me up about how good their coffee is, so keep it going. But with that being said, let's get back to it. So yeah, Mike, take it away.
I was actually looking at the new Holosun products coming out because I am kind of becoming a Holosun guy, dude. And they came out with the new SCS-320. Now, let me tell you what this is. This is a fully enclosed red dot. So it is like their typical like 509s and all that stuff. And it is a direct mount. Is a direct mount on the K configuration. Like enclosed reticle for a like 320, like the not the 320 but the 365s and the other really small
So this is basically like their enclosed optic, but for small frame pistols.
yeah, for your typical like Glock 43Xs, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fucking dope, dude.
Yeah, I think that's Hollow I think is doing some really cool stuff. I think I talked about it on my episode with Taprack Tyler, where we were talking a little bit about the Hollow optic. That I think was like Dirty Civilian. I think it was the channel that did a video on it, the one that's got the night vision and thermal overlay. And it's basically like very similar to an EOTech, but it's running digital and night vision. Running night vision and thermal. And that thing is really cool, man. I think like that's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of technology develops, I think, because if you can start integrating a lot of that stuff, I think for me, the big thing is a lot of people look at like actual night vision, right? And they're like, man, 3Gs for PVS 14. I still got to get a helmet. I got to get a J arm. I got to get a mount. I got to get battery packs. I got to get all this extra crap. I don't have these thousands of dollars, right? And I know people be like, oh, you could save, you could sell stuff and upgrade. I get the arguments. I know there's stuff out there. I know there are ways, yes, you could do that. I know that also for a reality of a lot of people, that kind of money is a big ask right now, especially for a lot of people who are having a hard time with the way the economy is right now. So I think that like if you can get an integrated optic that is kind of a bridge gap to where you can have that at least on your rifle, that I understand, yes, maybe you don't always want to be looking through your rifle for than that night vision thermal capability. But if you can have something like that with that capability on your gun, and you can get it for $1,500, I think
Mhm.
that's a lot more reasonable, and a lot of people will gravitate towards that as a way to maybe supplement that area before they move on to something else, or before they, maybe if they don't have the money for something else. So
Yeah.
I think seeing that stuff is going to be really cool. And as obviously as that technology develops, a couple of years from now, that'll be even cheaper.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at it right now. DRSNV is what it's called, and it is
Yeah.
MSRP at $1,176.46.
Yeah, I think they were saying like there's a thermal one and a night vision one, and then one that has both, and I think they're three different prices. But yeah, I mean it's really cool to see, and it's basically just a little camera on top of the UTEX style optic that is what you're doing with, and so you gotta, you have to play around with your zeros a little bit, but it's really cool technology, I think, and I think it's
Mhm.
especially cool to see that kind of thing you can do thermal overlay over your night vision so you get the best of both. And I mean, to me, it's really impressive.
That is
And I'm
super
kind of
cool.
shocked to see that Holosun is the first company to come out with this. Is really, really, really what I'm seeing is the thing that gets me is that it's like it's of all companies, it's the Chinese owned company that is selling this to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is getting you affordable night vision. Isn't that crazy?
Right. Like that's the part that blows my mind, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe the communists had something right. I don't know.
Won't
Uh,
even sell it to their own people.
Yeah, what I mean, like that's the other thing too, is like the whole T-Rex arms thing where they're like, hey, every dollar you spend with Holosun, you're buying you're sending money back to China, which they're arming the CCP and with these optics. And it's like, yeah, but they're also arming me with these optics.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like realistically too, if I know anything about China and the Chinese military, they're probably giving the Chinese military way worse versions of what they're giving me.
And and it's so crazy because like, the funny thing about it is that Holosun's products are usually really fucking good. I love all of my
Mhm.
Holosun products, and also they're coming so what's that god awful Trijicon optic that's like a circle and it's got all that parallax in it in the glass?
Oh, you mean the MRO?
Yeah, the MRO. So
Don't trash
Holosun
my MRO.
so the MRO, I do not like that optic. It is not a good optic in my opinion. I think it has too much play in it. Um,
Yeah.
so
To,
Holosun is making their own version of it, the CRS. It comes with a better mount and
mhm.
a better optic than the Trijicon.
So I will say I do have the Trijicon MRO, and the one I will say that the big downside for me was I had it on my Daniel Defense at first whenever I first got it and was playing around with it, but I noticed that under magnification, like the thing just does not magnify well. The dot is big and blurry and looks kind of slanted. It just not magnify well. That same magnifier behind like my Aimpoint Pro or any of my other red dots, no problem, right? Nice crisp
Mhm.
dot. Behind the MRO, big fuzzy ball of gross. I There's a lot of parallax, so running it on like my PCC, like my CZ Scorpion on the mount, it's on an American Defense mount. Running
Mhm.
it on there, it works pretty well, right? Because my idea is like, look, it's a PCC. I'm not shooting distance. I need red dot on bad guy pull trigger. It's good enough for that. But yeah, you would think for the money that you're paying and with Trigicon's reputation that you would be getting a much better product than what you are. So that's just the thing that gets me is like, and people are gonna be listening to this episode and be like, think we're Hollow Sun shills or something, but like we ain't making any money off of this.
No, I
Uh,
wish. I would literally suck a dick to get Holosuns for free.
but yeah, I mean, I think it is really cool to see that like they're making stuff. And the thing that gets me, the thing that, again, it blows my mind, is that we are seeing more innovation coming out of a foreign owned company from a nation that supposedly, is going to be our next major rival, pumping out crazy stuff. And American companies are like, hey, we released the same optic, but now it's in brown.
Yeah,
And we're
exactly,
supposed to
and
get
we're gonna
excited.
charge you an arm and a leg for it.
Yeah. Or they're like, hey, we made it to where it takes double A batteries now, and you're supposed to be like over like hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't. It's the same. Like I'm not. Why would I buy one over the other? And then now, like you said, Holosun, they're coming out with a bajillion different models, a bajillion different everything. And yeah, I mean, I just the thing about that is I think like I wish the American market would step up its game in that regard.
Yeah.
and be able to compete a little bit more.
Yeah, and compete with the price.
Yeah. I obviously I understand like, labor cost is definitely a thing,
Hmm.
and that obviously coming from China, they can get away with paying people less. And there's, some concerns about the legitimacy of the labor, but it's able to come into the United States for significantly less, which means it's being bought up by a lot more people, and they're fairly reliable, fairly decent, and they're working really well. And actually, speaking of that, I was going to say, just while listening to this guy CivDiv talking about his experience in the Ukraine. He's a dude who I've talked about him before on the show. He was a former infantry marine. He went and fought with the Peshmerga, which are the Kurds, in Iraq against ISIS. I think he spent some time in Syria fighting, and then he went to fight with the Ukraine. Right?
Hmm.
A lot of the money's real tight for those guys, right? And so he was talking a lot about people getting buying like basically budget kit and being combat effective, right? People buying, $9 airsoft chest rigs, and because they don't have a chest rig or they don't have pouches, and buying just anything and everything you find. And a lot of the very common optics these dudes are running, because they have to pay for all of this out of pocket. They're buying Holosun.
Hmm.
Widely available, they're easy to import, and they're cheap, and they work.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
People are out there fighting an actual, the biggest thing for me out of this, just a kind of little segue out of the Ukraine conflict and seeing all these dudes spending real world time on the ground, is all the crap we heard from dudes over the last 20 years about you have to have this product or you're going to die has been complete and total bullshit.
Yep.
Push product, right? Now, granted, yes, do certain things have certain advantages? Sure, but we are literally watching in real time a conflict of people running kit that everyone here 2 years ago would have laughed at, and they are fighting an actual war with it, and they're doing fairly decent.
And they're combat effective. They
Yeah,
are
this is
effective.
on both sides. On both sides, they're running knockoffs, and they're not running Cry, they're running Condor, they're not running EOTech and all this other stuff. They're running Holosuns, and the guy was saying like they didn't have fancy light mounts. They had they were duct taping $5 Chinese flashlights because nobody had nods.
Hmm.
you know they have entire groups of people now who basically like their night vision is basically solely reserved for special operations guys, because they don't have a whole bunch and it's expensive, or they'll hand one to an entire infantry squad and like, hey, you're on watch tonight, you've got the nods, right? And all this stuff that we've been hearing about, like, oh, like all the dudes are like, oh, if you don't have nods you're going to die, or if you don't have this product you're going to die. Well, we're watching a conflict of two countries, with one with Western equipment, one with Eastern equipment, fighting it out in a conventional war, and we are seeing that none of that crap actually mattered. It didn't make that big of it. It wasn't like a wonder weapon. It wasn't like, oh, this dude's got Cry precision pants and dual tubes. He's unkillable.
Yeah.
No, the dude taking trenches is, he's doing it with an imported M4 with a Holsoun optic with a flashlight taped to it while he's running across in his airsoft kit. You know, That's blowing my mind when I'm watching this. It's like everything we've been told by all the GWAT dudes about, you got to have this, you got to have this, you got to have this. Like, yeah, if you got the money for it, I'm not knocking it. Absolutely. If you can afford high quality, high tier stuff, absolutely, dude, go get it. But clearly, from watching this, in my opinion, you don't have to have 30 grand worth of gear on your body to be combat effective.
No, not at all, dude. You can be running the typical fucking airsoft, like make fun of him, haha, at the range, and you'll still be combat effective.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, is like you look at this and it's like the Civ dude, Div guy, right? He was talking
Mhm.
about this. He said there's a dude who you literally just couldn't find chest rigs, right? So
Yeah.
he took a pair of BDU pants and a sewing machine and made one. And I'm like, and this dude lives, he's alive, he's doing stuff. Like, it's not like, oh yeah, then he got shot the next day because he didn't have, a $600 plate carrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets me, is it's like, everyone thinks you have to have this special operations gear, and it's got like war dogs. You got to have 18 grand worth of kit on your body to be effective. Like, sure, having really good stuff, does it help? Absolutely, right? But you just like you can't buy your way to be a better shooter, you can't buy your way to be more combat effective.
Yeah. It all comes down to that training, but all comes down to that training, dog.
Yeah, that training, the experience, all of that. It's like I guarantee you, you take a dude like those Grand Thumb videos that have been coming out with the IDF guys and the Ukrainians.
Mhm.
You take those dudes, you give them, you know, airsoft equipment and holosun optics, and they will outplay somebody with, the latest and greatest gear and kit because they've got the experience. You take a dude who's got 30 grand worth of gear on his body, but zero combat experience, and you take these two guys who've been fighting in an actual war for 2 years, right? Put
Mhm.
them head to head. I guarantee you those guys win, regardless of the kit they're given, because they know what they're doing. They've been doing it, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my hot take about this that I think is fascinating to watch this is that I mean I've always been a big believer that like yes, there's certain things you should not skimp on, right? Like I think you should like for example with rifles, I think you should get a quality rifle. I think if you were going to do buy once cry once, get something really good that's not going to have problems. Personally, I'm a big fan of Daniel Defense's rifles. But BCM whatever, like whatever your flavor is, LWRC, things like that, whatever your thing is, get a really solid rifle and get it outfitted with good stuff. After that, you can get all the fun guns you want, but get one rifle that's like super set up, right?
Mhm.
Don't skimp on the gun itself. Don't skimp on the optic. But like when it comes to gear and stuff, I think there's stuff that plenty of people overpay for.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So
mhm.
speaking of Ukraine, lately we all saw there was a huge terror attack in Moscow where I think it was like there was 5 dudes I think in total, but only 3 of them did the shooting. Long story short, like a handful of guys went into a there was like an event center type of deal, shot
Mhm.
up a concert and then set fire to the building. And there's a lot of like suspicious stuff going around with it. But I think that one of the things like as of like how do we apply this to our lives type of deal that we can take out of this is that these dudes in the center of Russia's capital, right, pulled off like one of the greatest terror attacks that they have seen since like the early 2000s.
Mhm.
And sadly, no one in that event center could do anything about it. Like some of the telegram footage that's out there is brutal, man. Like these guys were herding people into corners and just mowing them down. It was very reminiscent of like that mosque shooting in New Zealand a few years back
Yeah.
of just shooting into crowds of people and just brutal stuff, man. And no one there was able to carry a gun. No one there was able to do anything to stop it. The police were way too late. Well, I think the last report I heard was 75 dead and a couple and like over 100 wounded, and
Damn, dude.
people potentially furthermore that might die. You know, no one allowed to carry a gun.
God damn, dude.
And who knows? Maybe if you were in that situation and you had a gun, maybe you couldn't stop it,
Yeah.
but at
I
least
mean, you gotta think of how many people are just getting trampled.
yeah, but at the same time, it's like one of those things where it's like, at least you go down swinging. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least you could do something other than just sit there and take it. I mean, that's for me. If there's not a clear example of why you should have a firearm on you at all times, like that right there, 100% one.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I believe that 100%, dude, because, I mean, it might be a little bit of my paranoia, but I always play out those situations in my head where I'm in a grocery store, I'm at a bank, I'm doing something so mundane and just so normal, along with the beat. And there's been a time or two where I'm like, damn, my gun is like all the way out in my truck. Like I have no way to defend myself right now. And it is a little paranoid and it's a little creepy because we shouldn't be thinking that way. We should always be thinking of like the brighter side and the better things, but it's a realistic thing that could happen.
Well, I think it's not so much that it's paranoia. I would say it's more situational awareness. And I would say that um, it's kind of like opening Pandora's box in a way that I think like once you kind of switch on and you become situationally aware of things, you can't really turn that off, right?
I
And so
mean,
it's something that's kind of always going on in your head a little bit. And like I understand like the idea that like yeah, the odds of of a mass shooter coming into
Kmart,
the
yeah.
quickie mart down the street when you're going in to grab a thing of milk and a Gatorade, not incredibly high, right?
Hmm.
But again, like that situational awareness of being like, hey, what's going on around me? What would I do in this scenario? Things like that. I don't think those are necessarily bad things. Like I would
Well,
say,
you still gotta think on the spectrum of it, dude. Like thinking about, okay, something could come in here and hurt me, or this situation of me playing this out in my head isn't green. That's not in the green. That's in the yellow.
yeah.
Like you're always being in the yellow is a form of paranoia.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on to which level you take it. I think like you could definitely take it too far to the point to where, being too scared to do anything. Like for
Well,
example,
that's like being all the way in the black. That's why it's a
well,
spectrum.
I don't necessarily mean like being like freezing in the moment. I mean like okay, so look at like people are talking about this whole eclipse thing that's supposed to happen in April, right? Have you seen stuff about that?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Y2K.
Yeah, so
It's Y2K all
oh
day.
dude, so many people across all spectrums, it's the end of the world, it's the rapture, it's whatever, right? Insert scenario here. I think overthinking it would be to the point to where you stop living your life and you don't go anywhere and you don't do anything on April 8th because you're convinced like it's like you said, like Y2K type stuff, right?
Hmm.
Whereas I think having a certain level of situational awareness to a certain point of being like, not so much maybe necessarily to the point of paranoia, but to the idea of like, thinking like, okay, well, what would I do if I were here and something were to happen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool, great. Like, and just kind of having that in the back of your mind. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Like maybe yeah,
Well,
if you
just because I
dwell
say
too much on
paranoid doesn't mean negative annotation. Like, I don't mean
it.
being
Okay, see, I thought
paranoid
you were saying
isn't negative, but it is a form of paranoia. If you carry a gun on you, I would be concerned if you weren't a little paranoid,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Because I feel like when you put that gun on your waist every single day, you are telling yourself, your gods, and your society, hey, I am taking initiative. And if something bad were to happen, I'm going to lay down my life to save my neighbor, to save the person next to me that I don't know them. I don't know their personal life. I don't know anything about them, but I'm willing to die for them.
right. I think that's exactly what it is by carrying a firearm, you are assuming a certain amount of responsibility both for you and for those around you. You are saying like, hey, I am willing to stand in that gap and do something. Like I know that I'm willing to suffer whatever consequences there may be, whether they be legal, personal, whatever, and deal with whatever situation is going to happen.
Even the mental side of it, you're accepting and acknowledging, like, hey, mentally, I'm prepared to take someone else's life to save the lives around me.
Yeah, yeah, and that's and the other thing too with that is I think that's another reason too why we talk a lot about carrying that medical gear. You
Mhm.
know, um, one of those things too is just like standing in that gap. It doesn't always have to be just with your gun, but like having that first aid kit with you all the time. Being like, yeah, I am prepared to go in there and help save a life if
Yeah.
possible.
Or yeah,
I think
it's a dangerous situation even in, like, a car accident. Like, you're accepting, like, "Hey, if I pull on the side of this highway to save this person, to help this person that's, like, in a flipped over car, I'm taking the chance that I just get fucking hit by another car and just get smoked," you know?
Yeah. Prime example. I've talked about it on here before where I've been in the car with my kids, and seen a car flip over in front of us. And I pull over, I grab my IFAC, and I go and I start, I tell my kids, hey, lock the door, stay in the car, and I'm gonna go make sure this guy's all right. And I think part of that is one, by doing so, it's like I remember like it always stuck with me. My grandfather when I would have grew up with him, my grandfather would always stop anytime he saw someone in trouble like that. And he would always say, one of these days that could be you, and you'd wish that somebody had stopped to check on you and make sure you were okay. And that always kind of
Mhm.
stuck with me, right? And again, situational awareness, kind of read the scene and kind of make sure you know what's going on. But doing that, like I think for me, it's like I further set that precedent for my kids too to see that like, hey, if someone's in trouble, we help them. Like that's what we do,
Mhm.
right? And that you know it didn't have to be a scenario where I brought up my gun, but I was ready to help somebody. And yes, you do assume that certain amount of responsibility. You are assuming a certain amount of responsibility for that situation as soon as you get involved. And it's very easy for a lot of people just to turn the other way and do nothing and just, oh, someone else will take care of that. Oh, call the cops will take care of it. The ambulance will take care of it. Well, it's like, you know, um, who shall I send? Send me. You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, here I am. Send me.
Hmm.
So it's one of those things where I think like if you're going to carry a gun on you every day, or carry medical equipment with you, like you got to understand like you are taking inadvertently a certain amount of responsibility for you and for those around you if you want to get involved. That there is a certain level you need to be prepared for and prepared with. And I think that realistically, if you're not mentally prepared to accept that and all of the positives and negatives that come with that, you just probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't carry a gun. Just like if you know for a fact that you are not willing um, to die in combat for this country and stuff like that, don't enlist.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's the same concept of like you're basically when you put that gun on, you're enlisting to this. I'm part of this. I want to be a part of that wall. I want to be a part of that line that helps people or will defend people, even if I put my life in danger. Kind of like enlisting in the military. So if you are not ready to do that, don't sign up for it.
Well, I think like realistically, there's something, just kind of innate about it. And I think like America was kind of built on that idea of people helping each other out. Um, there's tons of stories you can look at, especially during, the early 1900s, where, you would have, there's actually a famous picture of it. I can't remember exactly where from, what state it was in, but there was a woman who was going to lose her farm. And because she was a widow, her husband had died. And the bank was going to foreclose on the farm, and like the bank sent people there, and all the locals got together and like beat the crap out of the guy from the bank and was like, "You ain't taking that farm." And they got all their money together whenever they did an auction, and they went to go do an auction, and nobody bid for the auction. Like they just kept having to lower the price until it was $1, and then they'd given her the money, and she bought her farm back on a foreclosure from the bank for $1. you know
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff of and it doesn't have to be necessarily against the bank, but I mean like America is always has been built on this idea of you know protecting each other and helping each other and not relying on the bank, not relying on the government, not relying on anybody else. And I don't think it needs to become a political thing. I think whether that crony bad guy is the bank or a big corporation or a form of government, like standing up and standing together is a huge part of that. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of places in the country, you don't really have that sense of community. I think, especially, it's more prevalent, I would say, in larger cities where you're surrounded by people, but you feel isolated.
Hmm.
Whereas in smaller communities, I feel like there's a little bit more sense of community in that regard.
Yeah.
And that's not entirely true across the board. That's not a blanket statement. I would just say it's more of a more common than not type of thing. And
Yeah.
I understand in large cities there's still pockets of people who have community and things like that, which that's fantastic. Um, but I think that that's the thing, is that we've become so isolated that we don't really feel that anymore. And you can see famous cases of that. Like um, there's that one gal in New York back in the 70s. It's her name starts with a K. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically she was walking home. She was assaulted and murdered, and like the entire neighborhood heard it, and nobody called the police because everyone just assumed that somebody else would do something about it. You know, it's that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is like
Yeah.
this lack of ownership for you and yours.
Yeah. I swallowed water the wrong way at the worst time.
That's how you drown, Mike.
Exactly. Absolutely, dude. I 100% feel that way, man. It's just crazy how something like that could even happen in such a populated area. And even me living over here in such a populated area, right?
Yeah.
What do? They outlaw shooting in all county area of the city. So what do you have to do? You got to drive all the way out of some place where you're not even going to know anyone. You're driving a good 2 hours away to go shooting even. So it's hard to even getting a shooting group together that's willing to drive that far every other weekend or twice a month, once a month, something like that. Um, and it becomes a full day thing. You're dedicating a good 5, 6 hours of your day just driving.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing too, is this idea of isolation, to
Mhm.
where I can't tell you how many people I have talked to or have hit me up personally on Instagram after hearing this stuff. I've been like, "Hey guys, we love the podcast. It's awesome. I thank you guys so much. Hey, I'm in this area. I don't know anybody. I don't know how to get a hold of you. I don't know how to find people." I know we've talked about this before, but it's like so many people feel like they're the only ones in their area, or that if they speak up about the things they're into, people are going to think they're bad or weird or an extremist or something. And so a lot of people just don't,
Mhm.
they don't talk. And a lot of people have this idea that, oh, well, if something goes down, the whole town will just band together. Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I find it so funny because everyone I know, a lot of people I talk to even that don't even own guns that are like, "Yeah, if Russia invaded here or China invaded here, America's got so many fucking guns that we'll just murder them all." I'm like, "Well, you don't have any guns and you don't know anyone with guns. Who's gonna come save you?"
Right.
'Cause
Right.
I feel like it's gonna be a large fuck over everyone else. So like a ton of the populace would actually either get rounded up or they get killed. And those people with guns that actually planned and prepared and had community and stuff like that are going to be out in the woods with 20 other people. And they're not going to fucking go into a CQB situation to save you. They don't know you.
Right. Well, a great example of that, like we could look at like a lot of historical examples. Um, there's been, time and time and time again where a nation is taken over, a resistance group forms, and the force that has taken over the area, anytime they're hurt by the resistance, they do reprisals against the community. Well, it gets to a certain point that, depending upon the willingness to fight and the willingness to resist of that community, you might, as the resistance, start to become the bad guy in their eyes. You're the cause of their pain. You do something to hurt the bad guys hurt them, not you.
Hmm.
So now they start to hate you, and they just want you to just lay down their arms because they did it. They're like, well, we surrendered. We're living under them. Whatever, life goes on, right? And it's like, well, great, that's good for you. I'm not going to live under that. You know what I mean? But then that's how collaborators happen. That's how, you see these things again and again, where people will start turning each other in, seeing people turn each other in and turn on each other. And I think that, unfortunately, that's what some of the things I think you might see. I don't think you'll see that everywhere. I think America is such a large and vast country, and so spread out geographically, that won't be the case everywhere. It can't be the case everywhere, right? Some areas absolutely will stand together. Some areas will crumble and fall at the first sign of struggle.
And I'm thinking those
And
areas are California, Seattle, where New York, all those places. Don't don't plan on big, huge brotherly band together.
oh yeah, I mean, look at those areas fell apart like, to themselves already. Look at, the Summer of Love. If you're in an area that faced widespread looting and rioting, when we were not at a war with a major power, we didn't have troops on the soil, and nothing, there was just opportunistic violence, right?
Hmm.
People realized, a lot of people realized, and kind of pulled their head out, that line between our daily life and chaos is extremely thin. And I think Tim Pool touched on this pretty well in one of his episodes I was listening to lately on the Timcast. The only thing that keeps order is faith in the government. And the example he uses, he said, if someone shows up in a uniform, right, or someone shows up and looks like a clown, right, in a clown outfit, and knocks on your door and is like, "Hi, I'm here from the Crown Police," right? You don't give them any authority or legitimacy because you don't recognize the uniform, right? You
Hmm.
don't care. It's just some dude dressed as a clown. He's like, well, eventually, if you don't care about police or the authority of the police, because you don't care about the government and the authority of that government by which they represent, because you've lost all faith in it, then they don't have any power.
Yeah, they're the clown.
You
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you have, I mean, you imagine there's only a million police officers, like 1 to 2 million police officers in the entirety of the United States, I think. And that's including like active reserve, all of that, right? For
Hmm.
police. There's, you know, I think it's like 370, 380 million people in the United States. Like the odds are not great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you look at a city like New York. You know, a city of New York is, I think it's somewhere in the New York City is like 14, 15, 16, 17, I don't know. It's in the tens of, you know, it's in the teens of millions, right? Could be higher. There's 30,000 policemen in the New York City Police Department. It's a huge police department, but
Hmm.
vastly outnumbered by the citizens, right?
Hmm.
All it takes is that lack of faith. And we saw that, right,
Hmm.
during that summer of love. We saw that whole BLM summertime, right? Well, people rise up and just overpower the police department to the point to where they were unable to respond to other things going on and they were overwhelmed. You know, and all it takes is that at a national level. You just have a certain amount of people who are just like, I just don't recognize your authority anymore. You mean nothing to me.
Yeah.
You know, like think about it, right? The idea is that if a cop shows up, the thing that gives him the authority is his uniform representing the government and the gun on his hip, right? Is that he's got authority by force and he's got authority because you know that, like, hey, even if I take this one guy on and I win, there are consequences I have to deal with through a legal system that I cannot escape, right? So that prevents you from doing certain things. Now, if you have a gun and he has a gun, that authority of the firearm is equalized, right? So now the only thing giving him legitimate authority is what he represents, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is you know, even if it became a one-on-one, right, and you won that battle between him and you, there are still legal consequences that you have to face that you cannot escape living in this country, right? Like you'd have to be on the run because you're wanted for a crime and you can't just get away with it. It's not Grand Theft Auto. You can't just go hide, get 5 stars and, you know, then they go down. Like you're going to be wanted and you have to live with the consequences of your actions. But the minute that those like there's enough people to overload that system or to make that system non-legitimate and not enforceable, it no longer matters. And it, again, going back to like the BLM riots, when there's enough people committing crime that you can't stop all of them, you wind up stopping none of them, right?
Hmm.
Like see people rushing in and being like, "Oh no, there's 35, you know, there's 35 people rushing into this, you know, the store to steal stuff. I'm going to go in by myself and stop them." No, because they don't care about your authority. They don't. Your authority means nothing to them at that point, right?
Yeah.
So that once that glue is gone, that's where you know, you lose that. You lose that authority, and then the question becomes: once the legitimacy of the authority is lost in that regard, how hard does the pendulum have to swing in the other direction to regain that authority?
Yeah, because like we're talking full blown martial law, take it over. Police mean nothing anymore. You're listening to just military members, because that's
Right,
what
like
everyone talks about is like the end of our society.
and from historic the thing that really worries me about when we look around at things going on in our country is we see all these huge problems. We've got, you know, tons of just unmitigated illegal immigration, you know, rampant spending with the government, a government that's trying to get us involved in every possible war possible. We see all these huge major problems that are happening, right? And there's us, it's more than just one specific thing you could point to and be like, that's what's ruining the country, right?
Hmm.
There's just so many problems. And people think like, man, we need someone to come along and save us, or someone to come along and do something. And you know, and I know people get all excited, like, oh, Donald Trump, when he gets elected president, he's going to change all this, blah blah blah. I'm not putting my faith in one guy, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is like, okay, well, if someone has to come in and do something, where do you personally stand on that level between what needs to be done and personal freedom? Because I don't think realistically you're going to get both in the future.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, historically speaking, when the pendulum swings super left, that generally turns right around and swings super right. And you get totalitarianism and you get very heavy handed government who is
Hmm.
like, all right, um, you know, it's like a parent coming in and being like, all right, if you kids are going to fight over the toy, I'm taking it away and you're both going into timeout, but at a much scarier level.
Yeah.
So,
And it's a lot of people would argue that that's exactly what we're seeing now is people are like they're setting us up to do this.
oh yeah, and I think I know I have mental issues with this where I get into this and I start thinking and I'm like, you know, over the idea of like, okay, well, do we stand up and we do something about it? Like, does it eventually turn into a fight? Do we not? Is that what they want? Do they want us to fight? So then they have justification for force. So does that mean we should just not fight? But
Mhm.
it's just like this impossible situation because it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't fight, you don't stand up, you don't do anything about it, you lose your country. If you do, you justify the use of force against you.
Yep. And then it gives them a reason to just murder you all.
Right. And so it's like putting you into the situation where it's an impossible choice and you can't win either way. And I think it really just comes down at that point to like, what are you willing to do?
It's more of
What are
like
you
what you're willing
willing
to bet
to
on.
risk? Yeah, what are you willing to bet on and what are you willing to risk?
Mhm.
You know, I know there's a lot of people out there that'll just say, oh, for my cold dead hands, right? But I think realistically, for a majority of people, if the police came to your house 10 deep and were like, hey, we're here to take your
Yeah,
guns,
we're here for your shit. And you
I
see a
don't
big
think
black not
I don't
not
think
oh my bad, your
go-
turn. What's up?
I was gonna say I don't think there's gonna be that many people who are gonna be like, all right, I'm dying on my doorstep. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, I guarantee you those numbers would go from well, just like when the founding fathers found out, dropped down to what percentage of the population actually stood up against England?
Yeah, I mean, I think they say historically it's supposedly 3%
Yeah.
of the population.
So it's crazy. Like I feel like all that huge number of Americans that are like, oh yeah, from my cold dead hands, it's gonna turn into 3% again.
Yeah, and I think that that's realistically where it would be at. And I'm sure the other side of that too is there's going to be opportunistic people, which are going to take advantage of bad situations and take advantage of the chaos. So it's not just a tyrannical government you're going to be facing, but you're going to be facing the same things you would anywhere else in a totalitarian nation.
Hmm.
You know, criminal organizations, desperate people who are, just trying to get out of situations or people who want stuff. Like you're going to have to deal with all of that. And people are going to wake up and realize, unfortunately, what the rest of the world has to deal with on a fairly regular basis outside of the West. The West has been very protected and very coddled for a long time, and we've forgotten some of the brutalities of the way the world works.
Yeah. Wow, getting dark, dude.
I know I don't know. That's how we've been lately. I think it's just one of those things where it's just like
Yeah. I
super
know.
positive
I
when you see a lot of this.
I think it comes out of all of us all at once, right? So us as a gun community, like I was saying earlier today, like how I just fucking every time you turn around and other companies turn in fucking pussy and giving money to fucking people to ban guns, and shit like that. So I'm getting so tired of this left, right. And then constant laws and attacking, and it's just like the world is ending around us like all the time. And it's like eventually it just starts coming out of you, and I feel like me and you and a lot of people are just absolutely sick of it, just constantly.
For me, I think it's yeah, I think it's one, it's being sick of it, but I'm also sick of people just denying that it's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe I don't know, maybe for me it's just this is more of an event session and getting it out there. And I hope for you guys listening that, you don't just fall into that doom and gloom cycle like we have unfortunately on here. But I think, hopefully maybe you guys resonate with it because for me it's like I don't I see some groups of people saying like, yeah, man, things are getting bad. But there's so many people who are just like, nope, everything's fine here. It's like we're on the Titanic, the ship is sinking, and they're the dudes playing the violin. Just like everything is fine, everything is don't worry about it. And you're like my boots are wet, dog. Nope, we're good. We're good. We'll be okay. Or the people are like, no, we just gotta hold out till Trump gets here. We'll be all right. You know, and oh no, that won't happen here. That can't happen here.
Mhm.
And it keeps it in my head again. I think the only reason you hear those voices and those people saying that goes back to that idea about legitimacy is because if they admit that it's all gone downhill, they lose the legitimacy of that authority.
Yeah, yeah,
If they say, yeah, things are bad, we're done, we're toast, dude, that authority means nothing anymore,
yeah,
right? That means nothing. And so they have to tell you everything is okay because otherwise you lose that semblance of order. Because again, like, you think about it, the thing that keeps you from just walking out of the store with all of your groceries, right? One, I would hope a moral sense of right and wrong, but also the idea that, like, if I do this, that's considered stealing. Stealing is bad. Well, why is stealing bad? Well, one, I would hope you have a moral sense that it is bad. But two, because, oh, well, I'm going to get arrested for stealing, and then there's the potential of jail, and that's going to negatively affect me, and blah, 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 blah. But the minute that that fear is gone, people will just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And we see this in major cities all across the country. Like, how many cities do we hear constantly, this store's closing, that store's closing? Because people are just walking in, taking thousands of dollars of merchandise and leaving.
I forgot what store it was. What's big store here
I
is
think, oh, here?
no. It's just like the big store. I forgot where it's happening, but they're like
I know
closing.
in San Francisco, there's a bunch of Targets and like CVS's and stuff like that that are closing their doors because of that. At the
Oh
very,
yeah, and then the Walmarts that close their doors in the
yeah.
hood. Yeah.
Which you think about that with the Walmart thing, man. You're telling me, like so everything's about money, obviously, right? And profit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's gotten so bad that a like hundreds of billions of dollars company that is in almost every country, like, look, Walmart is huge. I think it is like the largest corporation in the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is bleeding money so fast from that location that they can't afford to keep it open.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Sad.
not good.
It's fucking
That's not
sad.
a good mark for the realistic, like, nature of the country. So um I think, with all that being said, April 12th, that Civil War movie comes out, and I'm curious to see that movie, to see kind of what their take on the scenario is, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of see. I like that they, at least from the snippets of the commercials, they kind of show people having like somewhat normal lives throughout it, and just kind of being like, yeah, whatever, it's happening, but it's somewhere else. Because I think realistically, like, as things move on, you're going to see that not all of us are going to be impacted by everything that happens around the country. But I think if you're living in some of the major cities, you're probably going to be a little bit more impacted than someone in a more rural area.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the rural area person won't be impacted. I just don't think it'll affect the daily life as much.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not food and things like that. That's all gonna get harder to come by, but like, I get what you're saying. Like in the broad spectrum of it, you're still gonna have to go to work and shit like that.
Right. Yeah, like, you're still gonna have to go to work, you're still gonna have to get food, you still have to pay your bills.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you live in, like, I'm just saying, let's say Seattle, right? Your safety will be more of a greater concern, I think, on a day-to-day basis,
Oh
and
yeah,
having to take
yeah.
more priorities and precautions than someone living in a more rural area that might be like, yeah, things are bad, but they're not that bad, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, because everyone remembers that little terrorist attack that happened in Russia. No, you remember the big one that happens in Moscow. Like the big terrorist attacks are going to be in the big cities.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, they're targets and things like that, but even just like crime,
Oh yeah,
like, is
yeah.
what, that level of things, of like things becoming more and more increasingly violent in certain areas where it's concentrated, not so
Mhm.
much out where, in the more rural areas. Will it still increase? Yeah, probably.
Mhm.
Will it be possible? Yeah, probably. But it'll probably be, realistically, in more rural areas, you generally see an increase in property crimes. Someone breaking into something, stealing stuff out of your car, stealing your car, things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas in larger cities, you generally see an increase in violent crimes. So while, bad economies do generally tend to relate to more crime, it's the type of crime and where it's located, and
Yeah.
it's going to impact you on a daily basis. So I hope it doesn't come to that, but it's one of those things where, like, you're sitting here and you're seeing everything going on a daily basis, and you're like, dude, who the hell is steering this ship?
And I kind of want to go back to the hypotheticals because I'm liking it, dude. So, um, hypothetically, in that situation, right? I love how everyone thinks, oh, even though there's a civil war going on and stuff like that, I'm not working for the government, so they're not gonna kill me. But that's not how it fucking works. Because we always in America, we see all these bad guys, ISIS, a lot of things where we deem them absolutely horrible people, terrorists. But if you flip it around and you just look at from their spectrum of it, they're the good guys. So they kill civilians, things like that. Obviously, there's hopefully most Americans aren't gonna be going around just like chopping people's heads off and drilling their skulls open and shit. But
Hmm.
um, a lot of the times, collateral damage is gonna happen. You're gonna have terrorist attacks at power plants, things like that, or quote unquote terrorist attacks or freedom fighting, um, depending on what side you're on. And guess what? There's a bunch of workers that work there that had nothing to do with it, and they're gonna get killed. They're gonna get blown up in the explosion.
Well, I mean, think about this, like from a historical standpoint, looking at World War II, Western Europe, right?
Mhm.
When we liberate an area, guess what everybody does? They find all the collaborators and everyone who, like, in any chick who slept with a German, and they're either beaten, killed,
Tarred and feathered.
humiliated,
Mhm.
like terrible things happen to these people because they're like, you took part in this. And it could have been something like, oh, you were a secretary before the Germans invaded, and they were like, you can type, you're going to work for us now. Something as mundane as that, right?
Mhm.
But because you were associated with them, you are part of them now. You took somehow a part of this and did nothing to stop it, right? And that's realistically what it's going to be. And then, like you said, there's collateral damage on all sides. Everyone's going to justify things one way or the other. I mean, look at our own Civil War in the 1860s. From the Sherman's March to the Sea, he marched across Georgia, burned everything to the ground, killed tons of people. And all in the name of bringing the war to an end sooner. We're going to make things so terrible no one will want to fight again.
Yeah.
And that excuse right there too, like making things so terrible that no one will rise up against us, has been used throughout history to justify terrible atrocities against normal people.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the
So
power of fear.
yeah, it's one of those things to keep in mind that, like, I think of it this way. The movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the scene where the bad guy rides up in his horse into the church, and it's the town that's been helping the Patriots. you know, and he says, anyone who brings forth information on where they are will be forgiven. And this one, no one speaks up, and then no one speaks up. And this one guy who's a total coward gets up and goes, his name's Benjamin Martin, and he hangs out at the old Spanish mission just down this road.
Mhm.
And he goes, thank you. And the guy's like, well, I thought you said we'd be forgiven. And he's like, and indeed you may, but that's between you and God. Then he walks outside, locks up the church, and burns it down with everyone inside because those people were collateral damage. And it was an example. He was making an example out of them.
Mhm.
Terrible things like that happen all the time. And so it's one of those things where I think hypothetically, like, again, there's, if it ever comes down to that in America, it's not going to be this idea that you're going to be safe. It's also, I think, one of those things where realistically, what I think you would probably see is those more rural communities and those flyover states it's going to be like become very feudalistic very quickly, where you
Mhm.
think like the medieval times, this idea of like nationhood wasn't as big as the idea of like almost more like city states,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is our town and we don't know you. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have to prove, like, why should we let you in? You know, and you're gonna have things like that, almost like The Walking Dead in a sense, right? Where you got like these little settlements,
I was just about to
right?
say, wouldn't that be really cool to think about, like, Central America turning into that, where it's like, "Hey, we're not part," 'cause, no matter what, every revolution is gonna fall to a side, so it's either gonna be north,
Yep.
south, or west and, east, right?
Hmm.
And so the rebellion's probably gonna pick, if I had to guess, and hypothetically, probably West Coast, because 'cause they're gonna have an easier time with farming, especially since they're gonna have to build, like, hides and huts and ways to hide in the mountains. They can hide in the Rocky Mountains, things like that. So realistically, where I see most of the revolution happening is going to be Central America and the West Coast.
And by Central America, for everyone listening, we do not mean like Mexico. We mean like the
Oh,
heartland of the
yeah,
United
yeah,
States.
yeah, like the center
Yeah.
part of America.
I know
So,
someone's gonna get super confused. Like, how did we get into what?
so like I realistically see it like being. I'll even pull up a map because I'm in front of a computer. This is so much nicer being in front of a computer, by the way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's going to be one of those. Actually, an interesting part about that too, just to kind of nerd out on this a little bit. There's a computer game I play called Kaiser Reich, and the idea is, it's this mod of a game called Hearts of Iron 4, and the scenario is that Germany won World War One, and so it's like what the world is like just before World War Two, right?
Hmm.
And in the game, America has a civil war, but it's actually a four-way civil war. So what happens is, like, the old South breaks off, the Rust Belt area breaks off, New England breaks. So actually 5-way. New England kind of breaks off, and then the West Coast breaks off, and then America is left with what's left. And basically, the South goes fascist. Then the Rust Belt goes communist. New England's like, we want no part of this, and they just dip out, right? And then the West Coast is like, yeah, us neither, and they just dip out, right? And so you have these countries where like the West Coast of New England, they're not at war with the United States, but they're just more like, we're not involved. Figure your shit out. We'll see you when it's done.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like you might see stuff like that where this idea of, if it came to like a civil war type of thing, you
Mhm.
might see active conflict in certain areas, but I think you're gonna have other areas, like you're gonna have certain areas that are so deep into conservative territory or so deep into liberal territory that like they're gonna be completely unaffected, realistically.
Yeah, they're not gonna
You
have
know,
any part. They're gonna be like, nope.
I mean, like if you're 3 states deep into the red zone, you know, you're not affected.
Yeah.
You get 3 states deep in, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
but if you're 3 states deep into the liberal area, like realistically, like the Northeast, right? Solid blue zone, right?
Hmm.
You might have a few, outskirts here and there, a few things here and there, but like you're probably gonna be able to lock that down pretty solid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be parts of America that are more conservative, they would lock that down pretty solid. For like you might have several hundred miles before you get to a liberal, right?
Yeah.
And that's the realistic nature of it. And then there's going to be other parts that you're on the border, and every day is a new hell.
Yeah. Dude, what like in our little scenario here, what I really see happening is places like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota being the big hideouts of a lot of the rebels. Maybe Utah, maybe.
Utah's got a lot of Mormon influence. Mormons tend to be very conservative.
Well, I'm not talking like the people. Like I'm just talking like straight up like where so if you were this
Or
rebel
like
leader, yeah, I would
I
hide
could
out
see
somewhere
that.
in there. Maybe not even full up in Washington because it gets so cold in the winter that or Montana that it would be really hard to keep farms going.
Well, and the other thing too, I think about is like what that's interesting to think about is like what would trade be like? You know,
Mhm.
I mean, you figure like there's so many things that can go one way or the other. So I know the common argument is like the conservative people generally control all the food, right? But the liberals generally have the coasts, which also includes all of the trade. So I feel like they could supplement the lack of food through trade, right?
Yeah.
They also have a lot of the tech centers and a lot of the industrial areas are in major cities, which tend to run blue. So yeah, we have the food, but we don't have a lot of the people either. And so um, it's like, do you get this kind of feudalization where you get these liberal city states scattered around that kind of absorb the countryside around them to keep them fed, and then they just don't care about what's around them? Less of a war and more of just like a feudalization.
Yeah.
And then you have area, or because I think realistically, what some of the things you might see is like you're just gonna get to parts of the country where they just don't recognize federal authority, and the feds just don't go there.
Yeah, welcome to Montana.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Right. There's parts where it's like, yeah, the FBI just doesn't show up here.
Yeah, if
Like,
they show up here, there's a chance they still get shot in the face.
yeah, it's gonna be like going back to the cowboy days, right? They're like,
Yeah.
that's the Wild West, man. We just don't go there.
Yeah, yeah. You
So
go
it's
out
like
there.
life won't really be that different, but you just won't be there. Now, if you want to travel into the big city, maybe there's a few more restrictions and a few more things you got to deal with. But like, you could live your life totally fine out on the plains, and they'll leave you alone, like back in the cowboy days.
Mhm. Mhm.
The
They might
federal government just show up there.
they'll watch you from afar.
Uh huh.
Yep. Because I totally see like Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota all doing something like that, where it's just like Wild West, don't come here unless, you know, you want to fucking die. Like if you say you're from the government, we don't care. Maybe only the
Yeah.
top half of Wyoming though, like towards Montana.
When I think it's interesting, like now that I live in Idaho, I'm keeping track of Idaho politics, and I know I don't think it's been voted on yet, but I know one of the proposed bills was that unless it is during a time of war, they want to make it to where the Idaho National Guard cannot be sent outside of Idaho unless it is voted upon by the Idaho legislature. Right. So generally the way
Mm,
that works for like the federalization of the National Guard
yeah.
Is the
is this them saying fuck you to Florida for Texas thing?
No, I think it's their way of saying like how the people were saying like, oh, well, what if Biden just federalizes the National Guard and then makes them leave the border,
Mm,
right? I think it's their way of saying you won't be able to federalize Idaho's troops.
mm.
And so it's their way of saying like Idaho's troops are for Idaho and Idaho alone.
Got you, got you. I thought it was the
Because
opposite, like,
to
oh,
my understanding, and I could be wrong, I'm getting this information from several people I know who are in the National Guard. And they maybe I'm wrong, maybe they gave me bad information. But to my understanding, the way that the federalization process works is basically the president is like, hey, governor of whatever state, I would like to federalize your troops and use your troops to go do this thing, right? Whatever it is, whether it be war, deployment, whatever. And then the governor's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. Stamp of approval, send them out. So, and they basically what they're saying here is that should the federal government come to Idaho and say, hey, I want you to mobilize your troops and go do this action, they would say, we're not at war. You can F off, or we can have the Idaho legislature vote on it. And if they say no, it's a no. And if they say yes, it's a yes. But the idea being that the federal government would not be allowed to just come in, take Idaho's troops, and send them somewhere else.
mm,
And so I think I've seen several other states propose similar type of things, as well as you've already got states on the gun law side of things who are like, oh, if you make a machine gun or a suppressor and it's within these borders, we don't care.
yeah,
You might still get in trouble with the Fed, but we won't enforce anything on you. And so you see states doing things like that. So you see states already doing things like that. And I think states are starting to kind of lay the groundwork for this idea of a separation from federal authority.
yeah. Damn. Yeah, that would be a way to look at it.
And I think it would be interesting to see that because, like, historically speaking, prior, during the time of this period of the Civil War, the idea of being an American was not as strong as being a Virginian or a New Yorker or or an Ohioan,
Yeah.
like you were, or a Pennsylvanian. You were from your state, and your state you had more loyalty to the state generally than you did to the nation. And also, each state kept its own military, which is why you would have these units in, the Civil War, like the 20th Maine and the 15th Ohio, and that was that country's militia, their National Guard, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that nation, or sorry, that states rather, and then they would all come fight under the flag of the United States. And it wasn't really until post Civil War, really getting into like the Spanish American War, that was seen as like the first real like uniting thing, that like this isn't just a North or South thing, or a this state and that state thing. This is an American thing. This is where our national identity starts to come from, to form together as a nation instead of a loose confederation of these states. And so prior to that, like I said, a lot of people were like, hey, we don't care what the federal government says. The federal government's not here. The
Yeah.
state government is, the governor's here.
Yeah.
And so I think it'll be interesting to see if that's kind of the route we go back to.
Mm-hmm. That was
It's
also
like,
kind of funny because that's why we have all these titles like mayors of cities and shit like that. But realistically, we don't need that shit anymore, man.
well, and I think that's the thing is like, again, at the time, that was the idea, was small government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the things that you should matter about, that should matter to you, is who's your mayor. Because it's like, you should care the direct area of where you live, right? Like, for example, I live in a smaller town. So it's like, whoever is mayor and the policies they make, what would probably actually affect me. And I might actually have an effect on that, being a relatively small town versus living in a city of several 100,000 or several million, right?
Yeah.
Where they're going to do whatever they want anyway. Um, so the idea was like, oh, your mayor, and then like your county commissioner. Okay, that he should be pretty important, because now you got everyone caring about the mayor. Then we care about the county commissioner. Now we care about the governor, right? And so on and so forth, right? Up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Like the governor should really, be who it is, and the president, no one cares. He can do whatever he wants because, none of that affects me, right? Um, but that's not the way things are now. Now everything is like, no one cares about local politics. Everyone cares about like these mega, politics of like, oh, who's president, or who my congressman is. But then they have no attention to what's going on at home, and what laws are being passed at home, and how things are going at home, and who are they voting for at the home, and everyone just cares about who the president is. And it's like, why does it matter? The president shouldn't have this power. Realistically, it shouldn't matter. Like, no one should really care that much about who the actual president is, because the president shouldn't have much power. They should care a lot more about who their congressmen and their senators and their local government is, but that's not the way we've done it now. We've changed everything now to where the only thing anyone cares about is who sits in the hot seat for 4 years.
Yeah. Dude,
But
I'm sorry to throw this out there. I'm just throw this out there real quick before we get off. But honestly, I'm getting so sick and tired of seeing the same shit. Like this whole time that we've been sitting here recording stuff, I've been having like stupid YouTube videos playing to my left because I have dual monitors. And I watched an entire Grantham video. Guess what? It was about a PSA rifle. How many rounds can we run through a PSA rifle before it breaks? Because it's a cheap rifle. It's a $600 rifle. Guess what? It ran fine for thousands of rounds. And it's like I'm getting like it seems like all the videos are like that nowadays, dude. It's the same thing over and over. There's nothing new right now. Like back when COVID was happening, back when BLM riots and shit, like stuff was coming out nonstop, week by week by week by week. Like new shit, new shit, new shit, new shit. CQB, do this, how to protect yourself, how to get out, how to defend yourself, how to backpack guns, 300 blackout, PCCs. Are PCCs even viable because we have 300 blackout? And like all this shit was happening and all this new shit was coming out because we needed a different form of protecting ourselves. And now stagnant, not a lot of shit happening. So it's kind of all been
yeah,
stagnant to me.
well, I think that's really what it is. I think that it's because it's all been stagnant. There's not been a bunch of crazy events that have been happening stateside
Mm-hmm.
recently. I mean, there have been,
Yeah.
realistically, there have been, but a lot of people just aren't aware of it. Like, I would definitely say the real thing for me right now is, um, there's all these people, like you hear these stories about these people who have squatters that won't be removed from their house, or like the lady in New York who got arrested trying to kick squatters out of her house, and then all the illegal immigration stuff. And I would be thinking like more like, okay, well, how do I deal with that? And a
Yeah.
lot of the things that are becoming problems, I think it's
It was also
people are,
the gun community also was having a record breaking amount of people buying guns. So like they had to come out
yeah,
with new guns because there wasn't a lot of guns out there that everyone wanted. Everyone wanted smaller guns. So 365, 43X, like the 48, like all this cool stuff was coming out. But now everyone's kind of like settled. Everyone's kind of chilling out. There's not a ton
yeah.
of like open world, like run around crime going on. There is a lot of crime still. It's at its highest peak right now with like stupid like in all these big liberal cities, but
Well, I think you kind of saw the surge right there, of everybody going out and getting involved and getting stuff during COVID. And now that that's kind of died down, like people aren't as scared. Like I think we've kind of like, got to the point to where like the people who were going to be moved have been moved. And I think we're kind of settling into a point to where it's like the sides have already been made. Like no one else is flip-flopping one way or the other. Like everyone is basically firmly where they're at, and you're not winning anybody else onto the team. You know what I mean?
mhm.
And so it's like the lines have been drawn, the teams are made, and now everyone's just waiting for something to happen, but no one knows what. The economy's ass, so no one's buying anything because no one's got any money, and so companies aren't putting a bunch of stuff out because they're feeling it too.
Mhm.
And we're getting into the slow season for the gun world, and
Yeah, everyone like don't no hate on the Ukraine or anything like that because I believe it's a huge thing going on and we can have a ton to learn from it and everything like that. But it has been going on for a while now. So some of the content that people are talking about, like warfare changing and drones and trench warfare coming back and
Mhm.
vehicles being obsolete and things like that. Um, I feel like it's almost scary for Americans to hear that too, because we've always relied on like, oh, the power of the tanks and like, shit like that.
I
And
think it's three. I think it's three things that go into that. I think it's one, it's removed from the average person because they think to themselves like, yeah, but like I'm not fighting in a trench,
yeah,
right? Like when am I going to fight in a trench? You know what I mean? Like it's cool information to learn, but they're like, I'm not doing that. Like the Russians are going to land here. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's not. That's not what they're thinking. Two, um, it's such a big thing that they're like, well, what am I going to do about it?
yeah. I don't have a
They're
javelin
like,
laying around. Yeah,
yeah, or like I'm not in the military.
yeah,
You know, I'm just some dude that works, in a hardware store, and I go home and love my family,
yeah.
and I just want to survive.
And watch Grantham
And
videos. And yeah,
yeah, and then the third side of that is like you said, like it is a little scary, but it's scary in a way to where it's like what am I as a Minuteman going to do about it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not.
Well, that's us coming from a different perspective. Us being like Minutemen, or us being like kind of gun geeks and war nerds like that. We're like, oh
Yeah,
man, this is really cool information. But your
yeah,
average subscriber really didn't subscribe for that. He subscribed because Grantham was freezing his favorite pistol and it was shooting.
right.
You know?
I think it's definitely really awesome information because, like I said, you and me are like nerds about this kind of stuff, and we dig that kind of thing, and it like the philosophical sides of the tactics and everything, all that like gets our blood pumping. But I think for your average person, it's like one, they don't want to admit the world is scary like that, and two, part of them, I think, again, they're like, well, yeah, I mean that's cool and all, but like, when am I going to be fighting in the trenches?
Yeah, like I'm not signing up for that.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So it's that's I think it's multiple things like that where it's a little more removed from your average guy to where he's like, oh, okay, he's like, I just wanted to watch top five guns under $1,000,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nowadays you can't even find that. So they're just watching videos of other people shooting their dream guns.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at, which I think, for us, the big thing that's been really popular with us, and one of the things I want to dive a little bit more to in the YouTube stuff is, like I've said on the podcast all the time, I'm real big about taking what you have and making it work, or finding ways to make stuff work and modify stuff that you already have without spending a ton of money because I'm poor. And so I want to dive a lot more into kind of cheaper alternatives of stuff you can do without having to dish out tons of money to get stuff. If you follow guys that followed me on Instagram, I've made my winter camouflage that one year out of a Tyvek paint suit and some spray paint cans to add some color to it, and it worked pretty well. And it was like $15, I think, altogether,
Hmm.
including the paint. Making helmet scrim out of laundry bags that have been spray painted, laundry bags, things like this, like things where it's like, man, I want to get stuff, but money is so tight right now. And being like, yeah, like, learn how to DIY.
Yeah.
People have been figuring out how to like do in the field stuff like this all the time, and it's like you've got nothing but time, and it could save you a bunch of money. And I've seen a lot of positive stuff come out from people seeing that kind of stuff of ours, and so I think that'll be something that's kind of interesting. Is like being the guy who, everyone wants to go out there and be like, oh, check out this cool new product that's super awesome and spend a bunch of money on it. It's so cool. You should go out and buy it too. And it's like, sure, yeah, yeah, there's stuff like that for sure. But at the same time, it's also like, or you could make it
Hmm. I
a
think,
bunch of money.
yeah, I think the last thing that I was kind of excited for coming out of the gun community was, first of all, anything Hollosun releases, because I'm like, that's a dope ass idea. And secondly is the uh, affordable night vision and IR lasers, of course. But I forgot. Damn, I'm having drawn a blank. I forgot what I was gonna say. I was excited for. Oh, uh, what is it called? The flashlight. The owl. Who makes the owl?
Rain.
Yeah, Rain. I was excited for the Rain 9mm handgun light.
Oh, I didn't know they were making one.
Yeah, they're making it and they're keeping it super secret. So I kind of like the lore of it, and they keep on dropping hints about it and shit like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be really cool to start seeing stuff too. That's also like what I would be really excited about is I understand there's a correlation between like ideally, in theory, price versus quality. I get that. And I understand like nice stuff generally costs money. But
Hmm.
I think it would be really awesome to see American companies produce stuff for average dudes that at average prices.
Yeah, that's something we want. Don't give me some Swamp Fox bullshit and be like, it's
Oh
just
yeah,
as good. No, don't
yeah.
fucking bullshit
Don't
me.
give me Chinese knockoffs rebranded as American stuff,
Yeah.
right? If I want,
Give
I
me
just
the
buy a
cool
Holsoun.
shit that China's making. Give me enclosed optics. Give me things like
Yeah.
that and give me quality.
And if it's a matter of cost of labor, okay, well then I understand that, right? But it's like pump something out. Give me a reason why yours is better.
Yeah.
Like if you want me to pay $100 more for it or $200 more for it,
Yeah.
like tell me why.
Yeah.
Don't just be like, yeah, we made this. It's better.
Tell me
You know what
why.
I mean?
Tell
Because
me exactly where all of your stuff come. Tell me
yeah,
exactly how you made your enclosed optic and why it's better than everyone else and why it's better quality. And I'll buy it.
yeah. I mean, look at like a Sig Romeo 5, right? Every optics company has the exact same optic. This of the like we're just using the Romeo 5 as an example, right?
Yeah.
Holsoun's got one, Vortex, Sig, all these other companies. It's all the same shit,
Yeah.
right? They're all made in the same place. None of them. are any different. They
They're
all
all
have
they're all the
a
same
up and
footprint
down
for the
button.
fucking
They all
reason.
they all take the same footprint. They all have an up and down button for brightness control. They all have, auto off or shake awake, whatever you want to call it. They all take the same battery. Like the only difference across the board is generally the housing, as far as what it looks like and the name on the side of it.
And the
Maybe a little
price.
bit of design.
And the price,
That's
yeah.
it. Yeah, and a price range that varies $100 between them.
Well,
And
depending, the holosun's always $200 cheaper.
yeah, I mean, how many times would we be at the gun shop and people would come in and be like, "Hey, man, what's the difference between these two?" And you're like, $40.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, no, but like quality, quantity wise, but yeah, $40. That's the difference. Uh,
They're the same.
they have the same warranty, same battery life, everything else. They're made in the same effing factory. You want to know the difference? One says Vortex on it.
Yeah. One's
There you
gonna
go.
claim they're American, but they're not.
Yep. You're paying $40 for it to have that V on it.
Yeah,
Yep.
dude. I can't even tell you, and it's so funny because you know exactly who is in the gun community too, because a lot of the guys that come in and buy guns and they're like, oh, I want red dots and stuff like that. They don't really care about the company, the brand, nothing. And then the guys that are into guns either look directly at the Trigicons or they look directly at the Holosuns.
Yeah.
Yep. And they don't
Yeah.
fuck with anything else.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, again, coming back and looking at it, we would always be like, oh, we want a combat ready optic, we want a battle proven optic, blah blah blah. And we're looking at the GWAT, we're looking at, obviously the American military has a huge financial budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, Trigicon ACOG, things like this, right? Because this is what we see on combat firearms, right? We see the things we saw from the GWAT, and we see like these Delta operators rifles and everything. We're like, yes, I want to be like that. I want to have the best of the best. And there's nothing wrong with getting good quality, solid equipment if you can afford it.
Yeah, I only
But
run EOTechs. Like
I think
all of my rifles are all EOTechs.
I think we can also look at actual conflict and be like, hey, what are these guys running? Yeah, would some of them probably love better stuff? Yes, but they are getting the job done with the equipment they have. The other thing too, I'm really learning from this is that the optic you're using matters way less than your capability. Like I worded it this way the other day in a post. Your capability to kill the enemy seems to be mattering less and less than your capability to detect the enemy. So like the dudes coming out of Ukraine were saying like night vision and thermal, like on drones and drones themselves, way more of a advantage than, oh, I've got an LPVO or I've got a red dot.
Yeah.
Or what red dot you have. They're like, doesn't matter. They're like, we're dropping, they're like, none of that matters when you can strap a hand grenade to a drone and fly it over a trench and kill guys without ever seeing them.
Yeah, I just saw this. I'll send it to you. I just saw a super fucked up video of this drone flying in. There's like two dudes like swinging shovels at it, and it just explodes, and they both drop dead, dude.
Right, like that's what I'm saying. Like when that kind of stuff is a reality, who cares what red dot you have?
Yeah, they didn't even have a chance. You don't even have a chance, dude. That's a spawn kill, bro. You don't stand a chance against that. Look, they were fighting it with shovels.
And that's my thing is like, talking to some of these guys that are spending time in like real actual conflict. The thing too is like we got so caught up in the GWAT and so caught up in having this huge number of special operators that all have social media and podcasts and are on everything and everything. Like I totally get the appeal, and they definitely have really awesome stories, and there are lessons to be learned, right? But take in context that their lessons to be learned were from a specific theater during a specific time over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
Right. And guys that went in and fought the war in 03 we're not fighting the same war in 2020. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in between. Things changed so rapidly with weapons, technology, tactics, lessons learned, all of this. Right. And none of that was against a near peer adversary like the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So don't just disregard whatever these people are saying because they're not former operator or whatever dudes, right? But we're seeing again conflict where like it's like, oh, are they running belt kit or chest rigs? They're running whatever the hell they can get the damn hands on. It doesn't matter, right? And that's one thing that guy was saying. He's like, dude, when it comes to kit, it's whatever the fuck you can find.
Yeah.
He's like, some guys are running the issued stuff because that's all they got. Some guys are spending their hard-earned money and buying quality equipment, but they're just getting there. It's the prioritization of gear, right? They are prioritizing a solid rifle system and a solid sidearm, so a solid weapon system and magazines
Yeah, you just
over
you see
the gear.
people running around with iron sights, dude. I would call them fuds. All right.
Well, that's the thing is he's like, they were talking about a lot of people are spending money and buying ARs because a lot of people just aren't running the AKs anymore over there. And he's like, as far as 7.62 AKs, they're non-existent. Everything is 5.45. So if you're running an AK because you're like, oh, when the Chinese invade, like, no country we would actually actively be fighting against still runs 7.62 by 39.
Yeah.
So either you have a 5.45 AK, good luck getting ammo for anywhere near affordable, or you just run something else. But they're all running ARs. They're all buying magazines for them. They all have dump pouches because you can't just replace magazines. You have to keep yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that, and so these guys are prioritizing the weapon first and then the gear second, and so they're making do with what they got. They're like, I need a decent system that I can fight with and I know is going to be rugged and reliable. Then doesn't matter the kit, it's going to get banged up and beat up anyway. I can repair it as needed. Give me something to carry my magazines with, right? And then priority is going to, if I can afford it, I really need night vision. But if not, I've got a white light, and
Yeah.
we'll just make do.
I have Molotov.
Yeah, I got a fucking flashlight. I can see in the dark. So I think it'll be interesting to see how a lot of this pans out and plays out.
Yeah.
With that being said, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. This has been another episode of Mid Tier Thoughts. See you on the next one.
All right, bro. Later.